Going on, good people? Kareem Paranda coming at you live once again. I wanted to create a video today to talk about an incident I recently witnessed at the grocery store. I was kind of disturbed by it, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. I decided to do this as a recorded video, because I wanted to make sure I touched all the things that I wanted to say. Sometimes when I do live recordings, I go with the flow of the conversation and I forget to touch on certain points. And so I'm doing it this way, even though I prefer to do live videos because of the real time engagement I have with the audience. But I want to just make sure that I do this video pre-recorded so that I touch all the points and edit it accordingly to gather all my points. So I went to the grocery store, did a little bit, a little bit of shopping, and apparently a young man was arrested for shoplifting. And there's a black officer, Puerto Rican, it's a multicultural, Puerto Rican officer or Spanish, Hispanic, Latino-looking officer, and a young white guy there. And I guess this young man was involved in some type of shoplifting, larceny, or whatever. I'm assuming, I don't know exactly. And as I was going to my vehicle to leave, I just heard the black officer talking all kind of shit to the dude. It was a black kid. Looked like maybe I'm gonna call him a kid, maybe like in his early 20s, but he didn't look well kept. It looked like he was having some hard times in life, right? And black officer was just talking a bunch of shit. Hispanic officer, Latino officer was just standing there in parade rest and just looking at the dude while they got him in cuffs and all that. The white officer, I guess, was handling the checks of warrants and ID and all that other jazz. But the officer was just talking mad shit to him. And so, I was acting like I was minding my business and, loading up my groceries and stuff in my car. And I was just listening. And I started getting upset, man, because I'm like, yo, why is he talking shit to the dude already in cuffs? Like, he going to jail. And it's like, yo, he already at a low point, judging by the way he's dressed and the way he looked. And, why are you dealing with him like that? And the thing that hit me as I was driving home, I was just thinking about it, was wondering whether or not a law enforcement officer's uniform on black skin represents what it feels like to have white privilege. I'm gonna say that again because, again, it was a thought that came into my head as I was driving home. I'm wondering if the badge and the uniform on black skin, or hell, even Latino skin, does it represent the feeling of having white privilege? And then I started thinking and reflecting back on my career as a police officer, right? And I worked in some of the hardest areas in the city that I worked in, and some of the, where it's known for gun crime and drug selling and all kind of crazy heathens and sheathen behaviors, as my old partner would say, Big Train. I remember having this mentality of, I don't behave like y'all. Even though I'm like y'all, even though we look alike, and I'm policing my own people, I don't behave like y'all. And it was also this ideology of, I had the advantage. I had privilege. I had some type of privilege. And I wasn't acquainted with the disadvantage that these people were experiencing that caused them to behave the way that they were behaving, but also invited me to come enforce the law in my privileged role. Growing up, for me, I wasn't privileged. I lived in underserved communities, and I never had power and privilege at the level or in the context that the law enforcement uniform and the badge provided. And so it's this ideology of, if you've always lost, and then when you finally start winning, the losses got you to the win, but you have a short memory of what that losing feels like because you're more committed to winning, if that makes sense. And so, I got to thinking about that. Does black skin feel like it has white privilege when wearing the uniform and the badge? And I'm not saying that that's true for every officer. You know, I think there's some officers out here that are conscious. They understand the issues, but to voice their understanding of the issues would probably segregate them as an adversary wearing the same uniform, because there's a certain political agenda at play to maintain things the way that they are. So to speak against it with your consciousness of recognizing how policing in one area is not like policing in another area would create problems for that particular officer if they were to manifest their real integrity related to how law enforcement officers do their job. So it's strategically best to just keep your mouth closed, or you'll get blacklisted, and then you'll enter into that political engagement of not being a part of the network. And then, you know, the system has ways of making life complicated for you. So many conscious officers stay because it's safe to do so. But for the most part, many officers are blinded by the power and control, the authority, and the privileges that the badge allows them to have. And this is going across all races. And so oftentimes, our discretion, our empathy is lost in our infatuation with the fantasy of never feeling powerless or never feeling disadvantaged because of the badge and the uniform. And I was listening to how that officer was berating this young man, this guy, again, who today, you know, when I look at it, I'm like, yo, you could tell he's in a low point of his life. Why not help him? But even when I was a police officer, I had no remorse or empathy in that same way. I'd be quick to dump somebody on their head or knock them out or do something to them. Because again, it's just the overexposure to constant negativity created that numbness, that numbing nature within me when I was a police officer. All I saw was just like some form of tragedy, some form of unfortunate circumstance, some problem that I had to figure out a way to solve. And I was constantly exposed to that, and it made my mind look at life from a lens that wasn't healthy. And so even as I sit here and I'm you know, making this video, you know, anybody who knows me knows that I'm a cerebral person. I'm all about the psychology of why things happen the way that they do according to our human nature. What is it about the brain? What is it about our experiences that causes us to behave the way we do in the current moment? And just thinking about that also, listening to some of the words the statements, listening to some of the statements he was making to this young man made me feel like he don't have a fucking clue what it's like to feel disadvantaged. Even if he does, or if he did, he's forgotten it. For him to behave that way to someone who's currently going through an unfortunate circumstance in their life. I remember when I was booked and preparing for my first appearance, and I was in that jail cell, I was completely powerless. When I was in law enforcement, I was powerful. And then when I sat in that jail cell, I was powerless. It was an eye-opening experience for me that caused me to look at everything I did in retrospect. Now, when I tell people about, you know, my desire to transitioning from law enforcement to counseling, many people assume, oh, you just couldn't handle the job. You were some type of pussy or some soft ass. I was far from it. I was so far from that. And, you know, you talk about violence, you know, I know a little something about that. I know a little something about violence. But what I also discovered is that I was operating according to a narrative that wasn't my own. somewhere along my journey, I subscribed to this ego, this masculine ego that's embedded in the culture of law enforcement. It's embedded in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, underserved neighborhoods, communities of poverty. There's a narrative that's inconsistent with a healthy concept or healthy perspectives on life. And it sort of warps your reality. We constantly engage in bad, assuming that it's helpful, assuming that it's good. And it was a reality or an understanding that I had to revamp and reframe to bring me to the point where I am today, surrendered to the ideology of I'm better off helping people as a clinician than I am as an officer. Preventative versus punitive. I rather the prevention. I think prevention is better than cure. And so, just being able to look back on my experiences and my credentials that bring me to that brings me to this point where I can speak freely and shamelessly about what happened to me in order to help other officers. My whole agenda or my goal is to help officers not make the same choices that I made. I don't want to call my I don't want to call my choices a mistake, because again, they gave me the intellect and the intelligence I needed today. And so I don't want to call that a mistake. I want to call that a divine orchestration of how I was going to learn what I needed to learn to do what I'm doing today. And that's providing services to police officers that help them improve the self-awareness needed to manage their careers effectively. I didn't have that. And I'm giving what I didn't have based upon my personal experiences so that other officers will be able to manage their careers in a productive fashion and not fall victim to the lawsuits, indictments, and all the kind of negative publicity that comes with not managing yourself correctly. So, good people, again, does the uniform create this concept of white privilege for non-white officers? The feeling of never being disadvantaged, maintaining a position of power and control, something that non-whites don't have access to until they acquire some stature in some way, shape, or form. And in this case, we're talking about the uniform. The uniform represents stature. Respect is automatically given to the uniform to those who, in fact, revere it as something that's honorable and respectable. Same thing for a military uniform. You strip the person of the uniform, do you still have the same amount of respect for them? A decent human being would, but we're talking about people who have experiences that shape their perspective on how they see the world, what they're taught to respect and what they're taught to disrespect. And that shapes how we treat others. Anyway, I was just thinking, y'all, I'm not, I'm not a journalist. Yeah, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a person who has a passion for helping others. And I'm not interested in being politically correct. I'm just going to say it's how it is. So, just food for thought, y'all. This is just food for thought. And I would love your feedback. What are your thoughts about this perspective? Drop a line in the comments. Hit me up. Send me an email. Check out my website, selftalkcounseling.com. Check me out on Facebook, SelfTalkCC, or at Kareem C. Paranda, my speaker page. I'm also on Instagram, SelfTalkCC. And we'd love to hear your statements and your comments, man. Until next time, good people, enjoy.